I'm Sister Vassa, and today I am gathered here with my esteemed friends and professors and fathers, Andrew Louth. Father Andrew is Emeritus Professor of Patristic and Byzantine Studies in the Department of Theology and Religion at the University of Durham in the UK. Father Andrew, would you like to greet our viewers?
Hello to everybody. It's good to be here.
And Father John Behr is with us, as well as Father Cyril Hovorun. I will first introduce Father John Behr, who also needs no introduction, but nonetheless, Father John Behr is Regis Chair in Humanity and Department Head of Divinity at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. And as Father Andrew and Father Cyril are as well, is renowned Orthodox theologian, author of many important books in Orthodox patristic theology, and has helped our understanding of the fathers and other aspects of our tradition. Father John, would you like to greet our viewers?
Hi, Sister Vassa, and everybody watching this. It's really good to be with you again. I think it's been probably a year or more since I've been on your show.
Yes, it's been too long, Father John, but you're always welcome on our little show. And Father Cyril Hovorun is with us once again. Father Cyril is professor in ecclesiology, international relations, and ecumenism at St. Ignatius College at Stockholm School of Theology. He's also director of the Huffington Ecumenical Institute of Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And I will stop there because all three of our illustrious guests wear many hats. Father Cyril, would you like to say hello to our viewers?
With a big pleasure. Hello to you, Sister Vassa. Hello to your zillions. I'm very happy to be here again.
Yes, Father Cyril was a guest in my most recent video on YouTube, which is really the reason I have gathered our three illustrious guests today, because I'm making this video as a follow-up to the last video, which was all about Father Cyril's latest book. This book, my friends out there who didn't see the previous video, it is this groundbreaking work by Father Cyril, Eastern Christianity in its texts. And in today's video, I wanted to also, in addition to having Father Cyril make some additional comments on this book, I wanted also to expand the discussion about his contribution in this book in particular, but also in previous books of Father Cyril about ecclesiology and the historical issues surrounding the challenge of church unity and so forth. I wanted to expand the discussion that we had there, Father Cyril, with you, and also sort of pick the brains of some of our leading minds in Orthodox theology today about your writings. So this is the reason we have gathered. Father Cyril, if you could perhaps once again share with the viewers of this channel how it is in this book that you wanted to take further and deepen what you already touched upon in these previous books. For our viewers who may not know, Father Cyril is the author of this little book, Political Orthodoxies. It shows us various models throughout history of the way the church has been organized, administered, or not. And Meta Ecclesiology, you might want to jot that down and check out this book. And also Scaffolds of the Church. See, this is a very interesting book as well towards post-structural ecclesiology. So, Father Cyril, how could you describe the additional way forward that you have shown us in this latest book, right? And I am, of course, hinting at what you write about a more disciplined kind of theologizing according to the dialectical taxonomies adopted and adapted to Christian thought of the fathers.
Thank you. Well, probably I need to thank you for advertising the books, first of all, but I also want to thank...
I expect the check in the mail.
Right, exactly. We will discuss it afterwards. And I also want to thank Father Andrew, Father John for joining this conversation. I should mention that I'm a disciple of Father Andrew. He was my supervisor in my years at Durham, and to a great extent, this works owns to him. Um, well, yes, it was kind of inevitable for me to continue speaking about the church, the phenomenon of the church in the latest book, even though the main focus of this book, not the church per se, but Eastern Christianity as such in this field of studies. The additional angle that I took in exploring the phenomenon of the church in the latest book, in addition to what I've written, is the following. I look at the church as an evolution, as a process, as something that develops, evolves, not entirely, but at least in its structural aspect. I differentiate between the nature and the structures or the scaffolding of the church. And I argue that we need really to have this differentiation. Otherwise, if we confuse the nature with the scaffolding, that we tend to kind of sacralize, divinize what is temporarily and what is vulnerable in the church and susceptible to mistakes and misuses, and the divine, what is unchangeable, what is infallible in the church as well. And essentially, in the latest book, I try to kind of systemize what is changeable, what is vulnerable in the church, and what is unchangeable through a kind of scholastic approach. Essentially, my project is somehow neo-scholastic. It's not the same as the Catholic neo-scholasticism. It's about reintroducing, re-evaluating the scholastic legacy in the Eastern Christianity. I argue that we have invented scholasticism in the East, and later on it was copied somehow in the West. And actually, it's one of the most beautiful things if we delve into the scholastic tradition of the Eastern Christianity. I think it's one of the really most beautiful aspects of this tradition, and it has been misjudged, has been mistreated somehow, has been even condemned as a sort of pseudomorphosis within the Eastern Christianity, and I believe it's not so. It's really very intrinsic to our tradition. It helps us to solve a lot of issues, and it is applicable also to the phenomenon of the church. It happened that when Eastern scholasticism was born, the idea of the church was kind of marginalized in the tradition of the classical Eastern theology. Other issues were more urgent, like the Trinity, like the Incarnation, and the church, even though the church was discussed in the first centuries of Christianity, after the 4th century, more or less, we see like a decrease of the discussions about the phenomenon of the church. And that was exactly the period when scholasticism was born. And essentially, we could say that this beautiful apparatus of thinking, of logical thinking, which we call scholasticism, and which was born in the 4th century, probably it goes back to Origen, it was not really fully applied to the phenomenon of the church. And what I try to do in this book is to try to kind of to be creative and to catch up, as it were, with the theologians of the past in applying the logical categories, particularly commonality and particularity, as well as properties, various sorts of properties, to the phenomenon of the church. And hence I come to conclusions that can be helpful for our times, like how can we understand, how can we explain the crisis that our church now goes through. And I believe the crisis that we all observe and we all see, we probably don't need to discuss them today, they are not fatal, I mean, for our belonging to the church. Those crises can be explained by this double nature of the church, the kind of vulnerable and invulnerable, changeable and unchangeable in the church, and can be accommodated in our consciousness somehow, so that we can see, we can register the crisis, we can register the problems within our church and remain the members of the church.
That's so vital pastorally for a lot of people today.
So that's the kind of the summary of what I try to achieve in the book.
Right. Thank you so much I will ask, well, either Father Andrew or Father John, whoever wants to go first, to comment on what Father Cyril just said. And to our viewers watching this and listening, let's note the pastoral implications of the healing of our thinking that the thinkers in our church contribute to, because the healing of our thinking helps to the healing of our standing as church, before God, heals our proper sense of belonging to the church and so forth. Who wants to go first? Father Andrew, Father John? Father John? You're muted, so I don't know what you're saying.
No, I was just going to offer Father Andrew to go first.
John, you want me to go first?
Yeah.
It seems it's the last book which I'm least familiar with. That seems to me the most important of Father Cyril's books. This massive exploration of all sorts of dimensions of Eastern Christianity, and the first thing I think that is important about it is awakening the mind of Christians, particularly Eastern Christians, to the enormous variety of our tradition. There has been a tendency throughout history to simplify and to identify aspects of the tradition and regard those as being fundamental. There are some things that are fundamental, but there is a lot more variety than we're prepared to reckon with. And the strength of the book Eastern Christianity is really essentially bound up with enabling us to understand how many different ways of understanding, of approaching the mystery of the church there have been in the course of two millennia. On top of that, it seems to me it's particularly important because the problems that the Orthodox Church is facing nowadays are primarily ecclesiological. And actually, if I go more sharply than that, they're primarily ecclesiological and are bound up with understandings of ecclesiology that are concerned with the definition and exercise of power. And it seems to me there is a conflict that has been intrinsic, I think, to the whole of the last century's experience of orthodoxy for reasons which we can't go into now. But there's been there is a conflict, and a conflict which is making it very difficult to maintain the kind of vision that drew many people into orthodoxy in the last half of the last century, which you could summarize by saying the vision that is contained in Timothy Ware's, my father Callistos' book, The Orthodox Church, which has a vision of orthodoxy as a whole, in which the different parts contribute to one another. The different traditions of the Orthodox Church, Greek, Russian, Romanian, and so on, are complementary, not divisive. And we've moved from that into a situation where there is open schism in the church now. And I think that being aware of where all this has come from, and particularly with the kind of guidance that Father Cyril provides in his book, by suggesting different ways in which we can get a sense of the diversity of understanding of what it is to be a Christian, what it is to be a member of the church. I think that this will be enormously valuable in enabling us to see what's gone wrong and how to do something about it.
Thank you, Father Andrew. So you directed Father Cyril's work when he was studying? Did I understand?
Well, yes, he was an exceptional pupil and very, very bright. And with very bright pupils, one just really sort of keeps them on a kind of a loose lead and lets them do their own thing. And I think that would be fair enough to describe our relationship when I was your so-called Dr. Vater.
Dr. Vater. Well, it's good to very enlightening to hear you, Father Andrew. Thank you so much. Father John, would you share with us some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I really appreciated reading through Father Cyril's work on these different things. I mean, that work is huge. for, you held it up for readers, but they might not have seen the width of it. It's 900 pages and it covers almost everything.
Oh,
It's
Father
not,
John, it's not as huge as yours work, though.
I'm not sure about that, but it really covers everything in such breadth and depth and takes us into corners that we didn't know about and a whole range of different things like that. But really with the question that Father Cyril started off with, or the theme he started off with, then Father Andrew picked up on the question of ecclesiology. And especially relishing that kind of scholasticized thinking, very precise categorical thinking of, nature, structure, common, particular, all the different things that you explore with all of that. But I wouldn't underestimate something that Father Andrew also kind of alluded to, and that's the need for really disciplined historical understanding. Yeah. So Father Andrew mentioned that the variety of forms that the structure of the church has taken over the centuries. It is just way too easy just to kind of let them all meld into one another and assume that that's what we've got now and it's never been any different and this is what the apostles left us with, simple as that. And then we get into the kind of question that Father Cyril was talking about the sacralization of what is actually a historical contingent. Yeah? And that is really the problem. What struck me, Father Cyril, in what you were saying just now, though, about the watershed of the 4th century, and the way that reflection of the church wasn't really given that much attention thereafter, whereas all the other kind of problematics took place, Trinitarian debates, Christological debates, and so on. It seems to me that that 4th century is really a watershed in a kind of in an anomalous way. In a sense, as the church became ever more universal, ecumenical, taking up the whole ecumeny, with Christianization, all of this to it, the vision of the church became ever more limited. Really ever more limited. And eventually, as you trace in your scaffolding of the church book, through what is in fact a positive vision of moving out and expansion, all of that, it kind of turns inwards and becomes a matter of territory and hierarchy, in the various ways that that's taken shape over the centuries. And then that just inevitably leads into the kind of conflicts that we see today, which are primarily about territory and hierarchy. Not about the mission of Christ or the mission of the church or spreading the gospel. It's about territory and hierarchy. But there's another way in which it's also that 4th century is a watershed, in that up to the 4th century, as far as I can see, one of the predominant images, one of the predominant ways for thinking about the church is as mother, Virgin Mother, in whose womb we are born through our entry into the Paschal mystery, and all the kind of things one can say about that. And then that almost disappears from the 4th century onwards. I think, if anything, it gets projected onto Mary and the kind of imagery we then use of the Virgin Mary, whose womb is wider than the heavens, New Jerusalem. So that's a way of kind of continuing that kind of reflection, but it's no longer that clear that in some ways you're still talking about the church. And I don't know of anybody really in kind of contemporary ecclesiology, East or West, that's really reflecting on that universal, expansive vision of what the church is called to be, of which the structures that we've got are temporary and contingent. Yeah.
Well, it seems like in our time, it's really become about being, as Father Cyril points out in one of his books, I don't remember exactly where, but I found it very enlightening when he says the paradigm has been that there's a little bit of grace to be had, and the church's job is to guard it very carefully and to mete out to those that the powers that be in the church find deserving or obedient enough or whatever, to give this little bit of grace that is such a rare commodity. Instead of what he suggests, he says, actually, there is all this grace flooding, flooding forth on Pentecost, that now priests and hierarchs are needed to help us navigate the waters of all of this abundant grace, because we need some help, accompaniment, but it's not because there's so little grace to be had. And I find that what we're doing today, the things that everybody seems to be most focused on, say the issue of the gays, things like this, they're all actually ecclesiological issues, the issues of marriage. It's about who's allowed at the table. Who are we going to allow? Who? It's really about us and not so much, these are not theological issues. God is not the focus. There is this constant, who are we? Who is allowed to be us? In the events leading up to Crete, the online discussions, I don't know if any of you waste time following what everybody's obsessed about on a popular level, but the most contested issue leading up to Crete was in the draft documents of Crete. What was everybody seemed to be worried about is who is allowed to be called church,
Right.
not any theological issues. Anyway, thank you so much. Father Cyril or Father Andrew or Father John, does anybody want to add anything to what we've heard already, what we've shared?
Oh, I think we've got to learn to open our eyes to the reality that the church is the heavenly Jerusalem, our mother in whose womb we are born, and that grace has been poured out upon all flesh, as you pointed out, sister. Yeah, we need guides in that. Obviously, we do.
But see, Father Andrew has pointed out that because Father Cyril delves into some of the lesser known parts of church history, sometimes he just pulls out of somewhere some kind of a world traveler, and and after Dionysius, he'll mention some really obscure author, in his Eastern Christianity in its texts, but the diversity also of the paradigms of the
Right.
church.
Right.
The fact that Father Cyril mentions things like there's also in some Syrian text, the church being also, it's not just, Eucharistic ecclesiology, either the parish, the parochial, the level of the parish, or the level of the one Eucharist, or the level of the diocese. He mentions that there are those paradigms of the church being already in one person.
Right.
Each temple of the Holy Spirit, that is
It's church.
that's already the church. Anybody?
I just want to say that I really liked one image about, which was applied to the church by Afrad, that it is a colored bird. I like this image because it's the bird is apparently it's not like a hierarchical thing or whatever. It's an alive thing pretty much, and it's colored, which demonstrates the diversity, how the early Christians perceive the church as very diverse. It's very kind of changing. It's and singing, what is important. I just in the end, I'd like to thank really everyone for participating in this conversation. I think this is really an important conversation because we usually dig into the past. We study the fathers, we study the history of the church, and it's important, I think, that's what we do in each one's work, to make it relevant to our days, to present situations. And I'm very grateful for this conversation because it's really a very good attempt, I think, to address modern issues, developments, whatever, from the perspective of the fathers of the church, or from the perspective of our traditions. And well, I hope we will continue these discussions. I think people really need it.
Yeah, it was good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sister Vassa, for organizing it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It seems that church unity itself has become some kind of an idol for which so many sacrifices are being made. It's like we're being held hostage by a very narrow interpretation of canonicity, and the ironically, for the sake of unity, we have just made it almost impossible to maintain it. And so this is liberating. It's liberating to be exposed to history by people like you, who expose us to the various aspects of history through the thinking, through the influences that were welcomed in, applied, learned from, and so forth. Father Andrew, any conclusive words before we part once again?
I think all conclusive words have been said now. I mean, but you or Father John. And I think I don't know. I think reading Father Cyril's book, I found a sense of hope, which one very rarely comes across in official utterances nowadays. They seem to be driven by fear.
Father Cyril gives us hope.
What a note to end on.
Thank you for giving us hope, Father Cyril.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you, Brother
for
Cyril.
That's it. Thank you for thrice blessing our channel today, you three fathers. Father Cyril, thank you so much for blessing us with your latest contribution and presence in our church, and you as well, Father John and Father Andrew. That's it, everybody. Be well, and I will see you next time on this channel. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.